I want to push these young kids to someone knock me out of this position. I don't know. I just wanted to see them fire. I don't care if I win or lost. I just want to see people fire off and get pissed off. I told them, I said, there's no way in hell that I would have allowed someone to come into this university when I was a student athlete here as a 43-year-old man and beat me. No way.
Welcome to the Sorin podcast. Today I have an amazing guest. Mr. Bert Sorin is here, and Bert and I have known each other for 20 plus years now, right?
Right at it, 20 something.
Yeah, it's amazing. So fun story, man. Like your background and now the president of Sorinex.
Yeah.
Are you still the president?
Yeah,
or is it
president, owner, whatever I need to do.
Owner,
garbage
you run
guy,
the show.
Whatever,
you
man.
run the show, man.
I guess.
It's tough to put a title when you do everything.
Yes,
right?
it's weird. Yeah, you just kind of grow into a position. You're like, I guess I'm here now.
Yeah.
So signed on, kind of had life, and then we're a lifer.
Yeah, man, 100%. I mean, so you started though athletically. Obviously, and we're going to talk, I think, a lot about your dad and Richard Sorin, his impact on me. We've talked about him. We'll get into more of that. But, I would say his impact on you, like as a kid.
Yeah.
And then what inspired you? Because you went on to be a tremendous hammer thrower and took that on as your athletic endeavor. Mainly, right?
Yes. Yeah. I had to pick a sport that like no one knew about. So
well, I think people know about that, man. People know about that.
Pops was always definitely leaned towards just the strenuous lifestyle, just strength since he was a little kid. Actually I think he had some kind of medical issue when he was really, really young, and he was in the hospital and his dad asked what he wanted, and so he brought him some strength and health magazines, some Field and Stream magazines, and that's what he started reading. And he kind of struggled reading early on, so his dad knew that if he bought him those magazines, he would read them. And his mom would get mad, so like, don't let him read all that trash. He goes, he's reading, right? Like he's
doing something.
He's doing
absolutely.
It, right? And then so he saw a movie, Hercules Unchained, was one of the first movies he ever saw, and he saw strength, as being something that was to be revered. And in kindergarten, got his first weightlifting set.
That's awesome.
And brought it to school for show and tell. Carried it to school.
That's wild.
To show his favorite thing. I mean, most kids are bringing like their teddy bear or something.
Oh, I'm sure that was probably very abnormal. Yeah,
very abnormal. Yeah. So little Richard Sorin with his little champion set brings it to school, and kind of fast forward it. He was an only child. Both parents worked all the time, lived in suburban New Jersey. So they said, hey, you can't like leave the yard like when we're at work. So what does an only child do? He can lift weights. And so he lifted in the basement, and but the basement was kind of short, so he couldn't do any overhead lifts. But that was when weightlifting wasn't powerlifting; it was Olympic weightlifting.
Interesting.
So he got to be a pretty good deadlifter because he could deadlift a lot, because you don't have to go overhead.
Keep going up.
Yeah. So then he would get on his knees and do clean and kind of push presses there. And then later he went in the backyard and he lived right beside a railroad track. So he would steal the railroad ties and slide them down the track and then flip them like a caber over the fence.
That's awesome.
And built his first platform and in the backyard. And then he was able to have like a full Olympic lifting platform. But I look back and I'm going, okay, this is 1963, 65. What only child was sitting in their backyard doing clean and jerks by themselves?
Probably nobody else.
Probably no one else.
Yeah.
And he was 12 or 13 years old, and his mom bought him a train ticket to York, Pennsylvania.
How cool.
By himself, and he went and got a hotel, his own hotel. And
at 13?
At 13.
Oh, wow.
In a different state. And went to the York, it was the Senior Nationals weightlifting, and they had a bodybuilding kind of show afterwards on the Sunday, and then they had the York picnic. So if you look back, like that's a little bit what we've kind of modeled Summer Strong as, like a competition, and then you get to see and be with all the athletes and eat together and hang out together. So he's a 12 and 13-year-old kid hanging out with Tommy Kono, John Grimmick,
that's
Norm
wild.
Szymanski, Bob Hoffman. and he's just a little guy, like
Sure.
like a little dude, you know, and by
Isn't
himself.
That's
and
wild to think about.
Wild to think about now when you put it in context.
Yes.
You know, my kid's 13 years. I can imagine him going
Just
to
here, get on a train.
get on a train. You'll find this place, you know.
Yeah.
And then he hung out all weekend.
That's
Crazy. So like those early things, I think, changed him significantly. And he worked out at the, started training at the Elizabeth YMCA in Elizabeth, New Jersey. And it's funny. He was telling me, he was like, yeah, there was his strength coach was Des Oban. Or, you know, if you ever heard the tight tan slacks of Des Oban, that was Pops' coach, was Desi.
Okay.
And there was another lifter there named Anthony DiTillo. And so DiTillo was Pops' training partner. So it's like, you start seeing some of these greats, and he goes, yeah, we had this big bodybuilding guy. He was like a big blonde guy.
Yeah.
He was there when I first got there, but then he left. I don't know. Maybe went to California. I don't know. I never heard of him. It was Dave Draper.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was Dave
That's
Draper.
crazy.
And so Dave and he, prior to Dave's passing, connected the dots, and they realized they worked out at the same YMCA when Pops was in high school, and Dave was just a couple years older. And he called him the big bodybuilder guy that I think he left and went to California. Not sure what happened to him.
Yeah,
but you don't know because you're like a kid.
Of course.
So that was kind of that early days of Pops's lifting life, and then it took, and that's all he really ever wanted to do.
Yeah, that's that. I mean, it's such a fun story, you know, like just to have that as your upbringing and be able to have those experiences, man. It's just
crazy, right?
Yes.
It's you look back, I mean, he was there when Bob Bednarski broke the world record in the clean and jerk, you know, as a kid, 15, 16-year-old kid, you know, and he now has Bednarski's belt in his office that he lifted with that night. Like all this just crazy stuff. He was just happened to be there for it a lot of times.
It sounds like it.
You know, you fast forward 1980, you know, Playboy Club in New Jersey, and Mike Bridges squats the first 1,000 on the pool deck. And he said, Pop said, no one was even watching. The guy was just training. And then
Kaz, just squatting 1,000.
Yeah, squats 1,000. We have a picture of it. And then Kaz comes out and does a silver dollar deadlift with Dave Waddington there.
That's wild.
And it was just like, wait, you were there for that too? He's like, yeah, it was weird. Like he just had this,
just happened to be there.
Yeah, I think like Paul Revere said, he had a heinous of being in the center of events. You know, it just kind of just found himself there all the time.
Well, that's, I mean, maybe right spot, right time.
Right.
You know,
or just having a passion for something, you know, much like our days at the Arnold when you and I would ride the bus together and talk. And
for sure.
And it was just, there was always a draw of strength and of just like, I want to be a part of it. And that's really how Sorin started. It was, he built his own stuff as a kid because that's what he had access to. And he felt that the equipment that was out there wasn't big enough, strong enough, adjustable enough, safe enough. And he was pretty good at building stuff. He said, well, I think I could do it better. It was never intended to be a business. It was never intended to be big. It was never, you know, we built our first business plan per se at like year 21.
Oh wow! So after 20 years,
after 20 years, and we're like, I guess we'll just keep doing this. Like people keep calling, so I guess, you know. And he told me, he said, I just wanted to have relevance and value in the industry that I loved. I just wanted to be around strong people, and I wanted to help make them stronger. And if their stories of being stronger, if I could help on that and have a little spin on the ball, then it was a life well spent.
Well, I feel like that is kind of an understatement of what happened, you know,
weird,
in
right?
hindsight. Yeah.
But the interesting thing is that's how it started. And even the year that he passed, he and I spoke, and I said, what did you ever want out of life? And he told me some of the things, and I kind of looked, I said, you won.
That's awesome.
You did everything you ever really wanted to do. I said, so you either have to choose now to sit back and enjoy all those memories, or choose new things that you want to do, because how often do people literally do everything they ever wanted in life?
I'll tell you what, being able to answer that question that way, you know, that's something, man. Cause I'm sure a lot of people, you know, you get to that point and it's all the stuff that you wish you would have done or that you didn't go after, or, you know, all these types of things that'll end up being regrets where, you know, it's to live a life with no regrets. And it's like, I went after it. I did it. And I did it the best I could do it. You know, it's doesn't get much better than that.
No. And you leave a lot of blood, sweat, and tears in the pathway of it, you know, and he was worn out.
Yeah.
Like, and I say, we lost him at 74, but I also say that he went out on top as low as he would have tolerated.
That's fair.
And he told me one day about 2 years prior to passing, and he told me one day, and he was still relatively strong for an older guy. But he goes, Bert, I don't know how to be a weak old man, and I don't like it.
Isn't that interesting?
Because I don't know what this is. And, and he was still, deadlifting close to 400 pounds at 74, but still to him, I'm a grizzly bear. I'm a T-Rex. This is who I am. And this other version, I'm not real big on.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of strength athletes specifically, especially alpha males, probably struggle from that same thing, because Father Time is the undefeated, right?
Unfortunately, that is true.
It is. Yeah. It is. So it was interesting and enlightening to see it first person, watch it, and then also be able to kind of download and debrief as the process was happening, and
sure.
and then try to kind of almost comfort him and say, hey, this is the process.
Yeah.
It's okay. You don't have to be the biggest, strongest guy anymore.
Sure.
You doing all these things for other people and helping them on their journeys. And, he was super proud of where you ended up, and he was, proud of me and proud of some of the other people that he kind of pushed into and saw them do amazing things. And that was, that was where he was, I think he finally landed on, like, it wasn't all the stuff I did. It was the stuff that, he helped. Like, if we built a weight room for a team and then they won the national championship,
sure.
or the Super Bowl, it was like we would call and text each other like, man, did you see? It wasn't a business thing. It's like, hey, something we did helped them. And that they got to see their dreams come alive. And that was the best part. And to me, that's still the best part.
Involved in so much, mm-hmm. right? And I don't even know, it probably for him and for you too, it's not something that you probably often think about. It's like, okay, this trickle effect of how did things go? But, just speaking of your dad, and I think this will be a real interesting story for people that haven't heard it. And ironically enough, I'm working on a book right now, and you were coming, and I'm going through proofreading it right now, right? And so one of the stories in the book is this story.
No way.
But it's like the first time I met your dad was actually at the National Strength and Conditioning Association, their national conference in Las Vegas, right?
Sure.
And so he had the Sorin X booth there, and I was at Arizona State at the time, so I went there, and you're going through and experiencing all this, and this expo, it was a break period. I don't know if it was lunch or
mm-hmm.
something like that, but nobody was really in the hall, so everybody had left their booze, whatever, and we happened to just be walking through.
You and your mom, right?
No, it was I was with this other guys from Arizona State.
I couldn't remember who was with you.
And it was just happened to be there's an inch dumbbell at your dad's booth. Oh, yeah. And it was like, I'd kind of read about it, didn't know the full story, but me being 22 or 23, whatever, is like, hey, there's a dumbbell. I'm going to try to pick it up. Right.
Of course.
So walk by and just reach down, grab it, pick it up. And then I put it back down, and your dad happened to be kind of in the aisle of that row of those booths. And, he runs over and his eyes are big.
Because the sound of that hitting that concrete floor is unmistakable.
Yes. Yeah. It wasn't. Yeah. And his eyes are big and he's excited and he's like, hey, did you lift that? Did you pick that up? And I was kind of like taken back, and I was like, yeah, I did. And he's like, well, can you do it again? Like, could you do it again? And he was so pumped up, about that. And then he gives me this liquid chalk, which I've never, ever put on my hands ever. And he's like, all right, well, this time I want you to lift it up and pull it up, as high as you can pull it up. And so I did, but I didn't let the liquid chalk dry. I didn't know what it was supposed to feel like, but I was just trusting, like, hey man, like, give me whatever, this is going to work. And so it kind of was still a little bit wet. But I still lifted it and pulled it up, and then he snapped a picture, and after that mailed the picture to me, which was cool. So he literally printed it out, mailed it, and put a little sticky note, just signed it. Right. And it was like, it was just like one of those moments, but we had a talk after lifting that dumbbell, and he was talking to me, and he's like, hey, look, I've seen a lot of people try this, do this. And, the gift of strength that you have is one in millions, right?
Yeah.
And it was that moment. It was the first time I met him, and he was like, hey, if you don't use this, you're stupid. You have to, you need to use this gift. Like, you have to do something because you're gifted in a way that you don't understand,
Yeah.
So it was like, I was getting into that world. I was lifting, I was trying to be stronger and not competing in strongman yet, but it was kind of one of those things that was like a reinforcing moment, right? Because I was at that age, I was kind of starting to connect the dots of, all right, I had played basketball and I was stronger than everybody I'd played basketball against, and was doing some good things in the weight room.
Sure.
But I didn't know where I could really
where
go.
that stacked
right? Like
up.
it was, you're starting to realize like, okay, well, maybe I'm a little bit different, or maybe I have some real gifts here, and and that was one of those moments where it's like, all right, that's and then obviously like who your dad was, the level that he was at, for somebody like that to say something of that magnitude, it's like a very reinforcing thing, at a young age to be like, wow, okay, I one in millions, right? Like, and potentially it was maybe even more than that in hindsight, but it's like, it was such a neat thing, like, cool. and the impact, it's, and I shared that with him and like different things too, but it was just like those type of moments, right? Like that, the trickle effect of that. And now, I mean, the fact that like, okay, well, we're telling the story here and I've told other people, and then, it'll go into my book and, just talk about it. Like it's one of those things that's like, it's such a neat moment. And again, it's like what we're talking about, right? Like, hey, were you there when that happened? And he happened to be there. He was right there with me and
with
like
a young Brian Shaw.
Yes. Yeah. Which is neat, man. It's like,
it's so
to think about that.
Neat. And you wonder, is there some magnetism, or like, is the book like The Secret? Is that true? Like, when people are on certain frequencies, are people predestined to meet or to say a certain thing? Or was there something that was like pulling Pops there that day?
Sure.
And the dumbbell went with us, and then you happened to come through. I don't know if is it chance?
Yeah, probably not.
Probably not, because there's too many times things like that happen. It's like, Jan and Terry Todd meeting a young Mark Henry,
sure,
or a young Bill Kazmaier, or you see these consistencies, and it's like, if it was on accident, it would happen maybe once, maybe ever.
Yes. Yeah.
However, why are there certain people that this type thing keeps happening to?
Yeah.
And no, that's what he loved. And it was interesting. I was telling someone the other day, Pops would bet on a lot of stuff. He wasn't a bettor though. He wasn't a gambler. He never went to casinos, never played cards, never whatever. And it was like pretty much after he passed that I realized what he was doing. He was addicted to seeing people meet and exceed their potential. He wanted it to be him, and he wanted people to challenge him constantly, and he loved that taste of blood in his own mouth, like challenge. But when he was unable to be challenged anymore, he wanted to challenge someone around them just to see the fight. And so there would be so many times we'd be in a gym, and a guy might have, let's say he had that day he had squat 500 for 4 reps. That was on his workout. Right before he got to the bar, Pop's like, $100 said he can't do it 10 times.
Wow.
And I'm thinking like, and Pops didn't have the money.
God,
like,
I would have loved that.
Oh, I made a lot of money.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's awesome,
yeah. That's how I paid for like Christmas presents and stuff like. But his whole point was, I realized later he was just investing in that he got to watch somebody push, and he'd gladly pay you just to see it happen. Yeah. But he knew if he had to poke you, it was worth it to him to get to see the fight.
Sure.
And I laughed, whether it was Tex or Rich Williams, or there's all these Jason Law, all these people that have come through our place have all got a similar experience, and it would just come out of nowhere. And sometimes it was double or nothing. I can't do it. And then I realized all he was doing is creating a fight.
Yep.
Just so someone mix it up. Yes, I don't care what happens, just someone better mix it up.
Yeah.
You know, and I look at that and I'm like, oh, he was just addicted to see people exceed their potential, or at least what they thought was their potential. And I say, it's easy to say meet their potential, but I think his big key was like, push the ceiling.
Sure.
Let's rev this thing and see what happens. Oh yeah. No, you would have freaked in that scenario.
I love that in training, man.
Yeah.
It was always like, can you top this?
Yeah.
Right. It's like that type of, and it's such a profound comment. It's like how to be a weak old man, right? Like I don't know that I'm going to understand that. Right.
You've never
and
had
it's
to
the
be.
perspective of, okay, when I get up to that age, you know, it's that makes you think right there. Like, it's just like, okay, how do you handle that? Cause it's, you know, it's different. And you and I were having a conversation about, you know, transitioning out
Sure.
Of our careers. But before we get to that, I would love to know, like, for you as a kid, having that as your dad, like, as that role, like what was that like for you? Cause I know it obviously shaped a lot, but
Sure.
like, what was that like? Cause it's like, we're talking about how he impacted me for one moment with the dumbbell, but it's like, you know, you got to have it all the time, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's like,
He was constantly challenging and constantly setting up situations for you. He was a teacher. He was a coach and a teacher, but he understood, if I just do just enough stress inoculation and give you an opportunity to succeed, it was never a freebie, but you always had to turn up the volume a little bit to get there. And it was, since I was a little kid, 2 and 3 years old, we would go fishing behind the house or whatever, and we'd wade back through the woods. And we'd be walking back, and he was like, "Bert, Daddy doesn't know where he is. Tell us which way we got to go." He knew exactly where we were. But I had to start making choices of,
Interesting.
are we going right or left down this dirt road? He would tell me, he's like, "You were so little, I had to pick you up over the mud puddles." But he was letting me lead us out of the woods, because he's like, because one day you're going to have to do it yourself, and you're going to have to believe you can. So I noticed there, looking back, there was always all these opportunities for me to succeed if I pushed, which built confidence, which built capability. And so I realized that he had a plan. He had a very intentional plan, even to the point where I don't remember us ever throwing a ball in our yard ever. Now, we lifted together often. We hunted and fished together often. One day I asked him, I was like, "Why didn't you ever?" And he goes, "Well, because I figured even if you were good at football or baseball, you would have probably not played past high school, because just probability is that."
Okay.
And he goes, "And if that's what our relationship was built on, I lose you at 18.
Interesting.
And he goes, "But if you love strength and conditioning, and we hunt together and fish together and camp
do that
together,"
forever.
he goes, "I have a hunting buddy for the rest of my life."
Yeah.
And literally, I mean, the year he passed, I mean, me, my 2 boys, and him were sitting in a turkey blind together, and we hunted together thousands of times, you know, had all the, and so I had a hunting buddy, a best friend, a business partner, a dad. And I asked him later part, like, "What did you want out of life?" He's like, "You were what I wanted."
That's awesome.
And, you know, so you think like, oh, the intent was extremely intentional.
Yes.
And it doesn't happen on accident. And he pushed these little stress pieces to where he's like, "Yeah, I would love for you to work for the company one day, but only if you want to."
Yep.
But then after a few different jobs that I had done that were, you know, one of them was Auburn University. I think it was 2012, I believe. And we designed some crazy stuff for that changed the industry. And he was not doing as many weight rooms himself anymore. But I said, "Pops, you need to drive down. You need to see this." And he walked in the room and he looked around. He didn't say anything for about 20 minutes. And he walked up and he goes, "I couldn't have done this." He goes, "This is the nicest weight room I've ever seen."
Wow.
He's like, "You're the man." He's like, "This is better than I ever did."
That's something.
And I was just like,
wow.
Like, it's like if you're the dog in the house and the owner throws you the keys of the house, you're like, "Wait, hold on. Like, I'm the dog."
Yes. Yeah. I'm not supposed to be good.
I obey. What are we talking about right now?
Yeah.
But that was his way of like passing the torch. And then, you know, as the business kind of grew and things like that, it was, you know, I would ask him, "Hey, what do you think?" And then, you know, then it turned into, "Hey, I trust you, whatever you come with, just keep me in the loop so I have your back." And then the last few years, he was like, I trust you implicitly. Whatever you think, he goes, "Just help me understand what it is so I could have your back."
Love it.
But that was not a day that it happened. It was like a 30-year process.
Sure.
And that's what I look at, just the discipline to, like, as a parent, to always be looking and realizing it one day he's not going to have the wheel.
Yeah.
And so he did realize that enough, but we got to co-drive for so long. Like, you know, there's, you know, when we were at the Arnold and the Mighty Mitts and all the different stuff. And like, just getting him to see him work at speed, you know, like I remember you were probably in the backstage. We were doing the strength equipment for the strongman that year.
Yep.
And for some reason they were doing stones onto a platform, and the platforms either didn't work or they didn't show up or anything. And I remember Slater and Terry and Kaz and Mar, everyone standing backstage like, what are we going to do? And I remember Pops going, take that rubber mat over there, bolt it on top of that yoke. And he's like, we could just go right over the yoke with it. And everyone went,
that's awesome.
Everyone went, huh? And then Slater was like, okay. And he went and grabbed pads and everything. And then that was the first time that a stone was ever done over a yoke. They reset it and it changed the game. But it was literally like in 10 minutes. And because everyone's scratching their head, like, what are we going to do? And then,
so it was supposed to be a platform.
It was supposed to be a platform.
That's I've never heard that story.
Yeah. And we built the yoke that year. For some crazy reason, Pops built 2 cross members. One, if you remember, had the 2.
Yep.
And then we made one with a single.
Yep.
We just didn't know which one was going to work the best. So we just happened to have the single one sitting in the truck.
Right there.
It was right there. And then
that's wild.
And then Slater ran over, grabbed a rubber mat, bent it over. We bolted it on because we had to have some bite, you know, when the stone got
there. So it wouldn't fall. Yep.
And then we tried it and everyone kind of looked at each other and went, holy crap, it worked. I mean, that was backstage at the Arnold the night before. That was the Thursday night.
That's wild.
Yeah. And so but I was there for that type of stuff happening so often.
Sure.
And then you just realize you're like, oh man, like the key of this is you better be dialed in. You better have a pulse on what's going on, and you better be really ready to speed shift when you got to.
Sure.
But the show has to go on. And that was installs. That was everything. It was sometimes we were building equipment and designing equipment the night before it shipped. And, you know, we would always kind of laugh. So like sometimes we were loading weight rooms hot, like out of the oven.
Sure.
Oven mitts on the truck.
Just go.
Because it's just like, it's where we are, man. We're a family-owned business. We got to get this stuff out. And, you know, this thing that didn't exist yesterday, but it's been spec'd by the coach that it has to do this thing. And then you sit up all night and you figure it out. At 4 a.m, it works. You figure out the prototype and you're like, all right, make 5 of them.
Sure.
And then you load them hot and then you're at University of Kentucky the next day putting them in. And so, but watching that was like, okay, so anything is possible. You just got to not give up. You have to be on it. You got to be bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and no fail mission. Like,
and I think that's like the example, right? Mm-hmm. Like you're seeing that in real time. And, you know, I think anytime, especially when it's your dad, it's like, this is the standard, right? Like that's what I'm going to live up to. That's what I'm going to do.
The fear was not doing it.
Yeah.
I mean, Pops was intense.
Oh yeah.
I mean, you remember.
Time. Yes.
You know,
time.
I mean, he was just as terrifying as he was loving. You know,
I'm sure.
There's definitely that side of it. And you learn that early age. You're like, I don't like that side.
Nope, we don't want that.
We don't want that side. So it's like, okay, well, you know, don't be sleepy and pay attention and move as least, you know, he used to talk about on job sites. He's like, if the boss is working, you better be working.
Yep.
So if like the top guy's moving stuff, you better be outpacing him.
Sure. And I'm sure he was always working. Yeah.
Yeah. That dude, God, I mean, when he started Sorin Playgrounds and then did Sorin Equipment, he was a PE teacher. So he was working in the morning, running a jogging class. Then he was PE teaching all day. And then had a weightlifting class that he taught in the evening for the kids, like a special class. And then before that, he would sell his bus duty. So he would, for $5 a week, he would do the bus duty of other teachers so they didn't have to do it. But then $5 in the 70s was a decent amount of money.
Sure.
And then so he'd get off. He had an old FJ Cruiser. He would fly down to Owen Steel downtown with the money he made, strap steel to the top of the Cruiser, which had a kind of roof rack, drive back home and go in our carport. And that's how he started Sornex. And then he would lift. When he'd get home, he'd lift.
Okay.
And then the rest of the night he'd build equipment and hand build it and just teach himself how to do it. He had a neighbor that knew how to weld and how to do all this stuff that kind of like, hey, you can do this a little differently and learn how to do it. And then we would, started selling to like local high schools and churches and little stuff.
Isn't that neat, man? It's like
and then wake up and do it again.
Yeah. The sweat. I think the fascinating part is the sweat equity put in. And a lot of people, I think, And you probably, I can only imagine, get this now, right? Because it has grown, Sorin has grown into what it is now, right? But that's also where it started.
Yes.
And so, you know, to understand that, but I'm sure there's a lot of people that walk in the door now and are like, oh, look at all this. Look at everything that came. But it's so hard to have a perspective of that's where it started.
Sure.
Right. So that's the infrastructure that was built.
Yes.
Was built there. And then everything comes from that. But it's like, you know,
just to do it with nothing. I mean, today I was getting my rental car leaving the airport, and we were choosing, you know, do you fill up the gas when you come back or whatever? And I remember being so stressed when they would ask me that question, doing math in my head and probabilities, like how I could save like $2 or $3. Cause I'm like, this is coming out of our kitty that doesn't have a lot in it. Yes. So it's like, I get the tiniest, crappiest car, figure out the littlest way to, you know, but I remember laughing. I'm like, oh man, that was like a thing. You had to figure that crap out. And when we had nothing, you know, and, yeah, I mean, and unfortunately, a lot of our employees don't know that because they weren't around when, you know, that was that. I mean, it was, you know, you drive 500 miles a day and go and do 8 zillion. I mean, it was dumb. You know, I found an old video the other day from 2001 that we were doing a full catalog video, and we thought it was like the cat's ass. Sure. It was terrible. Yeah. It was so bad. It was like on the little weird camera and like no microphone. And but it was cool because my guys are watching there, and then they had some more context. They're like, oh my gosh, like you truly have been doing this for a really, 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 really long time. Yeah. And part of me wonders, could we do it again?
Yeah. I think you could.
I mean, would an 18, if I found an 18 or 16-year-old Brian Shaw, I'm sure you were strong, but probably not crazy strong. Yep. It's like, here's what it's going to take to do that again. Yep. Would you go on the ride again?
I would.
Yeah.
I would. 100%.
Yeah. Yep. I would do it too.
Yeah.
I couldn't do it with this level of energy I have.
No. Well, you go back to it again. It's back to
get to go do it again. Yeah, but I would be smarter this time.
Yes.
But
well, the knowledge gained, right? Like,
oh my gosh,
this is, you know, it's getting people to appreciate the path that's been taken, and you know the people, you know, that have come before, right? That built the framework of whatever it is. And this is, you know, whether it's your company or, you know, I mean, I look at it as, that way. I always thought of it that way with getting into strongman, for example, right? It's like, there's a lot of men that came before me that laid that framework. And so I always felt like I need to know all of those names.
Yes.
I should know all of those names. So if there's somebody that competed before me, out of respect, I should know the history. I should study the history. Yes. And it's you know, I found out like there's very few competitors now, and like the guys now, I don't know. I don't even know. Like if you asked them like, hey, can you name 10 guys that came before you, right? Like, let's just give me 10 names. Probably not. They couldn't. Yeah. Right. And it's understanding that, but you know, the level of appreciation, I think, also from people, if they do understand the story and they do understand the past, and this isn't anything, it's not, of course, you know, just in sports or business or whatever, but I mean, it's understanding, having that understanding, and then it's just that respect that goes with it.
Yeah, because you could start seeing the backside of like the origin story of it, and then if you're paying attention enough to see what happened to those men and women later after the crowd has died down, then you could kind of see a full like life story of a strong man, or like of any context that you're in, right? Yeah. Then you could start having some real context and going, yeah, I'm the guy right now. Yep. I won't always be the guy.
Sure.
And it's okay. It's part of the natural progression of this thing. And kind of, I've told people, like, if you walk into Sorin, that we have this pretty robust museum. And I don't know if anything a few things are Sorin stuff, the original circus bells and the original things like that, and some of the blobs and stuff like that. But 98% of the things in there are not Sorin products. But the point of that is we realize a lot of things came before us, and a lot of things are going to come after us.
Sure.
And my goal for Sorin is that we occupy the space and time that we occupy in the strength world, however long that is, that we were relevant and we were valuable and helpful.
Big time.
And that's the goal. And because I realize at some point there will be no Sorin. I don't know when that is. Hopefully a long time from now.
Sure.
But I think when you could start taking on that mindset, you realize that one day Brian Shaw will not be here. Yep. One day Bert Sorin will not be here. And
sure.
when you start living your life with that in mind, you make every rep count. You make every competition count. You make every time with your kids count. You make every time we interface with a customer, you try to make it count.
Sure.
Because that might be the only time they ever, or it could be the last time.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, the day that Pops passed, you know, he sat in my office. We talked about business. We talked about hunting in Missouri this year. We cleaned up the gym. We rearranged it. And he did bench press, curls, and walked a yoke. And yelled at me because he thought I lost one of the 2.5 pound Yorks. Which is just hilarious. But yeah, it was just, you know, he was like, "Where's that York?" I'm like, "I don't know, man. It's the whole weight room."
Yeah.
But you look at it and you're like, okay, but I didn't know that was the last time I was going to see him.
Didn't know. Yep.
But he was just doing pop stuff. He was out there 75, 74 years old, walking a yoke because,
sure.
you know, headphones on, listen to Bob Seger because that's just what he does. But so when you look at it and you go, okay, if that's, we don't know when this ride's going to end. Like what's the quality of the ride that we're putting down consistently and how are you impacting people? And that's helped me a lot learning that just to go, if I go tomorrow, are my bills paid up? And I don't mean that financially.
Sure.
Meaning like anyone I've interfaced with, like, are they better because I've interfaced with them?
That's a good way to say it. It really is. I mean, it's like those interactions, you don't know how many you've got and that type of thing. And, you know, I think like you're saying, it's what are those interactions? Then, you know, what impact you leave on people.
Yes.
too,
that's all that matters.
Yeah. Because this is ultimately, you know, whether you're just leaving the room or leaving the state or whatever, sure. It's like, well, what is that person going to say about you and the interaction they have? Did you bring value to them? Mm-hmm. Right. Was there some type of great exchange there? You know, and
is their life this much better that you walk through that
Sure.
door?
It's a great way to think of it.
Yeah. And Pops used to say, he goes, at the end, all you're left with is respect and memories at best.
Yeah.
Hopefully you have a lot of memories and you still have some respect.
Yeah.
And if that became the goal, like he's like, and he would tell me someday, he goes, I remember he went out and deadlifted one day and I was like, "How you feeling?" And he kind of laughed at me. He goes, "Bert, you don't understand the mind games I've had to play with myself to keep coming out here to do this." He goes, "To know that I'll never be as good as I was before.
Sure.
To know that I'll never do it, ever."
Yeah.
And he goes, "But to put on my lifting shoes, to tape my wrist, and to walk out here and do it, because I love doing it. But also when he's like, I always had that carrot in front of myself, be the best you've ever been." He's like, when you know that's not a thing, that's when the real gut check is. Is it still interesting when there's no chance at a trophy?" And
so let's like to peel off of that a little bit, right? So you had your career with throwing the hammer.
Yep, sure.
At a certain point in time, I'm assuming it was like, all right, I know my career's over or I'm done or I want to walk away. Like, did you make that choice?
I did. It was after my second Olympic trials. I hadn't made the team. It was a frustrating time. And I sat back. I remember being in a hotel in California in Sacramento after the trials. And it was like, everyone was like, "Well, you know, see you in 2008. And I'm like, that's 4 years away.
Yeah. And
I realized how much I'd put into the last lot of years. And I started kind of doing the math of, to get where I wanted to get, what things would have to change in my life significantly. It's like, okay, if I'm really, really, really going to make a run at this, what is it going to look like?
Yeah.
A few of those I wasn't willing to do. And then I also came to the realization that I had been very selfish in my endeavors, chasing my athletic career. I'd put aside relationships. I'd put aside family members. I'd put aside my business that, you know, I'd been working at Sorin for 5 years at that point. And, you know, and I said, well, gosh, if I am going to I never thought of taking over.
Yeah.
If I'm going to be very valuable to this, probably training 5 hours a day isn't the best use of time if I'm truly going to like help build something. And so, and then my grandmother had just passed, and then Pops got prostate cancer like that same time. And I was like, me throwing a ball really far isn't that important right now. And so I said, well, I'm gonna hang it up. I'm gonna try to put this passion, this time into other things. And it helped. And then that was some really rough times with Sorin X, and while Pops was getting healed up and everything like that.
Sure.
And then a year or two later, kind of when the dust settled a little bit, I realized that I wasn't done yelling and screaming and throwing stuff. And so Randy Strawson, he was in an event, and then I asked him, I said, well, tell me about Highland Games. And I'd done it a little bit, but I was like, how do I get really good at that? I was like, what's the biggest? He was like, well, Pleasanton's the big game. And I go, well, how do I do that? He goes, well, you have to. I said, okay, cool. Yeah. And actually my goal at that time, I didn't really tell a whole lot of people, I had this wild goal. I wanted to be the first person to compete at the national championships in 5 strength sports the same year. As I thought that was almost impossible. I wanted to do track and field, Highland Games, strongman, powerlifting, and Olympic lifting. Okay. But I wanted to I know multiple people had done 3 or 4 of them over a career, but I'd never seen anyone try to pull it off in a year.
Yeah, that's wild.
That was the goal. And this was before YouTube and before social media and stuff like that. So I was trying to figure out how to like record it and like get it chronologically, and so people could follow along with it, to like almost a case study, is like, is this even possible?
Yeah.
So I knew I could make it in track and field. I figured out what the national championships was for Highland Games, and I was on my way to do that. I knew my powerlifting numbers would do it. I knew my Olympic lifting numbers were right at it. Strongman was the one that was like, ugh.
Yeah.
And I talked to Jeff Dolan. You remember Jeff Dolan?
I do.
So Jeff was at the Highland Games at one of our things, and he was like, hey, he was having an event, and that was like when the under 230s and all the other stuff, and it was just when it was cracking off. Like no one was really, really strong yet. Yeah. And they had like a 275 axle clean and press, which I like at that point, a lot of people weren't doing Olympic lifts. So like I was kind of had an advantage.
Big time. Yeah.
And also I was pretty good at farmer's walks. And so he had an event coming up that had farmer's walk, axle, and tire throw.
Oh, awesome.
And I was like, we're in on this. Like this is my chance. And something fell through, and he didn't have the event or something. But that was always that was kind of the goal. But I started training for Highland Games, and then I just realized I loved it. And then went after that, went after that for a year or two. And then I had an experience. I showed up at a game, an amateur game, and one of the ADs, and I introduced myself. He goes, oh, you're Bert Sorin. And I said, oh yeah. He goes, oh, you're the one that they said would be good if you tried. And I was like, wait, what?
What?
And he goes, no, they said you were like a hammer thrower or something like that, but you don't train Highland Games, but like, you never win a major event because like you're weak on 2 or 3 events, and you kick everyone's ass in the 2 or 3 you're good at, but like you're kind of half in it. And I went home going, my name is associated with someone that doesn't try. This is not a thing.
Yeah.
This is no way. And it was like, that was the sentence I needed to hear.
Sure.
The guy didn't even know he was saying it. He was just like, oh yeah.
Very matter of
fact and whatever. So that lit the fire back. And I think I was like, I don't know, 56 or whatever in the nation as an amateur. And like 8 weeks later, I was like number 2. And then I won the world championships as an AM the next year, and then turned pro. And it was like, but that was what I needed to hear. And that was
just a catalyst,
right? And that was where that hunt weakness became the mantra, is like, find the worst thing you're at. I would look at the national rankings. And I go, I'm the worst at, my worst event is this. And then I would just smash that event until I was in the top 10. And then I'd move to the next one. I'd smash it. And then
continue.
Just, much like strongman, much like anything else. But it was cool because it was, hammer was, when it was hammer, it's like hammer's the hammer. Like either
Sure.
you're really good at it or you suck, right? And this was just, man, I can make these monster improvements in my game just if I get my sheath or my caber or whatever. So it was able to like really teach me a lot about training because I had different specificities I had to work on. And then of course you get some injuries from overuse. And I kind of always say like, you don't really know about training until you've had to work around an injury.
Big time.
When everything works is like, okay, you don't really know what you're doing.
Yeah. Trying to figure that out when you are working around something is a challenge.
Exactly. So I ended up having a pretty good Highland Games career. Got to travel all around the world, and when I was over in Scotland, lifted a couple of the stones, and just got to live a really neat, part of that strength culture life, and so that was kind of like chapter 2.
Yeah, man.
And then got injured. And then kind of had that same, all right, now I'm 30 something. Now I'm still unmarried. I still don't have kids, and then you kind of go, okay, like probably time I want to have my kids sitting on my lap and take them hunting and all this other stuff. And I started realizing like time is ticking.
Yeah.
And the world doesn't change significantly if I can make a rock fall really far from my feet.
Sure.
Kind of
the same thing happened with the hammer, and then Highland Games.
It kind of resurfaced again, and so I got to ride the ride, and then I realized like I have other priorities, but what I also noticed was I learned like 15 or 20 years of competition that helped me design equipment and help like understand an athlete, and so I didn't realize I was kind of like getting the master's degree in what I really needed to do from a business side. And then you have a ton of contacts and, and all that stuff. So it inadvertently really took off. And then when I was able to focus all that energy.
And that's what I was curious about is, cause you said earlier, like, okay, you're being really selfish with the hammer, which in any athletic endeavor, if you want to be,
have to be extremely selfish.
And you have to prioritize it, right?
To.
Like it's I think it's always, like trying to find, I don't know if balance is the right word, right? It's probably not, because
it's prioritized imbalance.
Yes. Yeah. And so, that was certainly a challenge for me too. Cause you're trying to be the best, the absolute best at something. And then with other things that you have going on, it's prioritizing time.
Right.
And then how do you prioritize that time? And then how much time, do you allot or give to a certain area? And then how much do you pull back? And, it's such a balance, but like, trying to do the work that you're doing, then trying to be the best that you can be with that.
Right.
I would imagine that was kind of a back and forth of what you needed to get done.
It was. And that's why I was kind of realizing that I could be really good at 2 or 3 things, or I could be the best at one thing.
Sure.
And, for instance, like probably not the best for competition when you work from 8 to 5 p.m., you become a professional athlete at 5:30.
Yep.
And then on Thursday afternoon, you load a truck and you drive it to a gym, and then you install all day Friday, you labor yourself, and then you drive 2 hours away from wherever that place was because you coincided where you found a game that was this and that, and then you try to go be the best thrower in the world on the weekend.
Sure.
Not really the best plan.
No.
It's like, I moved 14 power racks yesterday and I drove 19 hours.
Not exactly fresh.
And so you start realizing, you're like, okay, like I could be good doing this, but like, will I ever be the best? And then you also realize, like, gosh, with all that other time, like I could have done these things in my business that will carry me when I can't throw things anymore.
Sure.
And so I kind of had to like graduate out of that. But I noticed every couple of years I would get a resurgence because I run on passion, much like you do.
Yeah.
We want to be great. And so then it's like, well, the interest is over here. And then I always have to like, hey, is this really helping?
Such an interesting thing mentally, right? Like, and did you have a point like when you got done with the hammer, for example, like say, hey, I'm never going to throw the hammer further than I did? Like that, like what your dad said, right? Like with the deadlift bar.
No, you're exactly right. Like I was done. And then in 2008, 4 years later.
But you were comfortable being done.
I was comfortable being done. But then when I started throwing the Highland Game implements far, I was bigger, stronger, in better shape.
Yep.
And then that creeps in because it's an Olympic year. You're like, well, maybe.
Yeah.
And then I told myself, I said, well, I'm going to go and went and threw with Koji Murafushi, the 2004 Olympic champion, one day, and felt pretty good.
Yeah.
You know, and then I told myself, I'll give myself 4 weeks to throw a national qualifier distance.
Okay.
And I was like, okay. And the first day out, I was like, pretty good. And I'm like, oh man, all right, we might have something here. And then I think I competed and then didn't throw what I would want to throw. And I remember feeling nothing.
Interesting.
And it was the first time I walked off of the track going, And I was like,
so
okay, no, I'm done. Then I'm done.
Yeah.
And then I literally got in my truck, drove directly to Highland Games practice, and I had two training PRs that afternoon. I was excited about those. And I was like, okay, I know what sport I need to be in.
Sure.
Like hammer is done. Never thought about it.
Yeah.
I think I threw once when I was 40 just to
go
out there. But I had to take a Dramamine because I wasn't used to spinning fast anymore.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah, I took like one set of turns and started getting like seasick. I'm like, oh my gosh, I used to do this for a living. And
that's crazy. So did you ever have that earlier?
No, heck no.
No.
I guess you get used to it. So then the next day I went out to compete and I threw a Dramamine down just so I wouldn't get sick. And actually kind of screwed up and I did outdoor, but then also did indoor. Well, I threw indoor and they didn't have anyone like really good show up. So I broke the field house record because they just built a new field house in South Carolina.
Awesome.
So I'm like 43 years old and then COVID hit. So like I had like a 2-year period of time.
And untouched, like, man.
Well, how does Bert Sorin hold the record here? I'm like, just wait till real people
Well,
get here.
it's a record, man.
It's a record. I don't know. It's a record.
Yeah.
But it was funny because other kids were throwing it. I was getting mad because the kids weren't like really throwing hard.
Yeah.
Like other schools. I didn't know who they were. I was like, come on, guys. Like, let's get with this. And they're kind of looking at me like, why is the bearded old man yelling at me?
Yeah.
And they're like, well, you're really good. I'm like, guys, I threw this in the 90s. Like, what are we talking about right now?
Sure.
And I just remember Mac Wilkins, who's a multi-time Olympian. He kept making Olympic teams. And they said, why do you keep doing it? He goes, because these young bucks won't push me off. He's like, I'll just keep making the teams as long as, he goes, your job is to push me off the team. And that's why I thought of it that day. I was like, I want to push, kind of like Pops. I want to push these young kids to someone knock me out of this position.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I just wanted to see them fire. I don't care if I win or lost. I just want to see people fire off and get pissed off. I told him, I said, there's no way in hell that I would have allowed someone to come into this university when I was a student athlete here as a 43-year-old man and beat me. No way.
Of course.
I was like, wake up, boys.
Yeah.
But I get kind of fired up.
Yeah. Well, you need to,
right?
man.
Like, come on. Where's the pride and piss and vinegar?
You have to have that. You have to. I mean, this is a interesting conversation, but it's just, it's like if, and I'm sure you felt this way too, like within your career, like if somebody beat you at something, now you're going back to the drawing board and saying like,
immediately,
I got to figure this out. That's not going to happen again. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I used to actually, if I got beat pretty badly, especially with some of the athletes from different, when I was a professional, I would actually, I would take them out to dinner afterwards. I'm like, hey, you want to go grab some food? And I'd take them out to dinner. I'd feed them a couple beers, and I would just
see what they would say.
To download everything. I'm like, hey, what do you do here?
Hey,
that's how I got good, man. Like I learned I picked everybody's brain.
Yeah.
And then some things you just hear and you're just like, okay, you're a freak.
Yeah.
But then other things you just pick up that one little thing and you're like,
Do you remember doing the like bus interviews that you did with me? You remember
that video is around somewhere.
Yeah.
It's like 2000. It was on a flip.
Yeah.
A little flip video.
I think
iPhones.
you were sitting in the seat in front of me.
Yeah.
You're like, hey, Brian, can we talk? And I was like, yeah, I guess I'll just sit over the seats and, answer questions about, I think you were asking me kind of like my prep and whatever.
Yeah. I can't remember. We were just sitting there and I was like, oh, this is Brian's smart.
We always had very good conversations though.
We did.
Like around the training and, some of the mindset stuff and, like coming in. And that was early on for me getting into strongman at that level was, okay, how do I get in? And like the very first year, I didn't get to compete. So I was the alternate.
You were backstage.
Yeah.
You tried to clean Rosie.
Yes. Yeah. I
saw that yesterday.
Yeah. That's crazy, man.
Yeah,
so it was 166, right?
Yeah. 65, 66, something right around there. Yeah.
Cause that was the warm up bell and it was red, which
was red. Well, we
per the Rosie name.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then everyone signed it after you lifted it. So,
Yeah.
and literally I had some guys there doing a video yesterday and I pointed it out. It's sitting right there, still loaded.
Yeah. Cause that was the one where, I think your dad and Terry Todd we were having a conversation about whether it was possible to clean it with one hand.
Oh yeah. I
Right to
remember
the
that.
shoulder.
And you tried it a bunch of times
Yeah,
in the backstage. So Pops and Terry, they were like the old men that sat up in the balcony on the Muppets. They would just, I'd share an office with Pops, and he and Terry would get on the phone for hours.
I can only imagine.
And pontificate about every strong person that ever lived and all the people coming up for the Arnold. And it was wonderful, like getting to be a fly on the wall and listen to everything. And I remember he and Pops talking about, Pops and Terry talking about, like, yeah, I think Brian can do it. I don't know if they go back and forth. Well, young Brian's going to try it. I'm like, oh, that's cool.
Yep.
You know, but I always enjoyed going back to what you were saying about that. I could tell that you respected the athletes that came before you and learned from them. And like, that's the thing. All of the champions have something you could learn from them. And I believe they are worthy of respect because they've been to the top of that mountain. And I always appreciate the athletes that are cognizant enough to realize that. And you are always extremely polite. You are always extremely, Derek Woodsky talks about he goes, how I judge people is when they ask me a question and I go to answer, I watch their body posture. If they lean back, that means they're wanting me to feed them. And he goes, if they lean forward, that means they're hungry for it.
Interesting.
And he goes, and we always talk about lean in, like always be the guy that leans in, because those are the people we'll invest in, because you go, oh, you're not entitled to this information. If you're truly asking, I want you really wanting. And I always saw you asking questions, watching how people were holding the bell, watching how just unraveling that whole Rubik's Cube of how to compete. And that was something I always watched you. I was like, okay, yeah, Brian's awesome. Like he'll be awesome. And,
well, that was for sure, man. It's without a doubt. I mean, it was every little thing.
Yes.
Right. Like every little thing.
As you started competing more and more, it was very evident. Just why, I mean, I didn't know behind the scenes, but I could see it. I could see it happen on the platform and go, oh, yeah, okay. He's removing variables.
Yes.
This is, and then that's one of the bigger things in competition.
Oh, massive, man. But I think when you get into it at that level, if you're going to, and what doesn't make sense to me is not doing that, right? Like, cause you're invested.
Right.
And I've put how much time and effort and energy and money and everything, blood, sweat, tears, all right into it. Right. Mm-hmm. And then I get to a contest, and if I don't control every variable, what am I doing? You know, right. Like as an athlete, what am I doing? And you don't want to, then you walk away and you have a regret because you didn't control something you could have controlled. Right. Granted, there's always going to be stuff outside of that circle that you can't control could pop up that you may have to deal with. Adversity is going to come, whatever. But if you could control it, why not control it?
Yeah, leave the acts of God to God.
Yes,
like control as much of the other stuff.
100%.
And I don't often see all the athletes do that. I rarely ever see them do that. And I don't know if it's hubris, if they're just like, I'm the biggest, strongest guy. I'll do whatever's in front of me. I'll just get super pissed off and see red and do it. And you're like, yeah, but that guy's really strong too.
Yes.
Or whatever sport it is, right? And the ones that the true champions, just they eliminate variables or minimize variables. And
just break it down.
And we talked about it in there. It's expensive.
Yeah.
It's expensive to purchase the equipment, to make the equipment, to store the equipment, to learn all the different aspects. You know, like I was saying in the Highland Games, like I had multiple stones that matched multiple game stones. You know, when people would get to the Stone Mountain Games, they're like, oh, the stone's 28 pounds, no one can throw it. And like, well, if you've never thrown one,
then probably not.
You know, like, it's real hard when you've never done it, you know.
But I've got one to train with.
But I've got one. I call it the money ball.
Yeah.
Because it's like, if you could throw it far, it pays. The one in Pleasanton, same thing. It's a big 26 and no one liked throwing it. It's like, yeah, but all you got to go do is go get one.
Yes.
And learn how to tuck it. And then for me, I learned that I could spin with it and create more rotational force. But because it was so big, I had to pinch it harder with my head.
Interesting.
So I started doing neck work because I could pinch the stone harder and I could get it further out on the radius. But it was just like, let's solve problems. Sure. That was probably the most fun about training.
Yeah.
It's just solving those problems.
Do you think because obviously hammer's very technical, Highland Games, there's a lot of components to that as well. Is that what you enjoyed, breaking that down?
Yes. I enjoyed like breaking, probably like you do in every sport. We talked about arm wrestling.
Yes. Yep.
Break it down, hypothesis. I mean, it was the scientific method, right? What's the hypothesis? What do you think is going to be what gets you what you want? And then my wife talks about, she says, you just have to run the experiment, don't you?
Yeah.
And for me, competition or even hunting, fishing, business, launching a new product, all of that, all it is, I've realized it boils down to it's running the experiment. Do I think the X factor will work? Yes. Let me do it until my hypothesis, I could prove it or disprove it.
Yeah.
And then when you get on it, and you see how excited I got, because when you got on, you're like smashing it.
Yeah.
And that little look on your face when you smiled, you're like, yes.
Yep.
I ran the experiment. It worked.
Yep.
Like, that's the payoff for me. It's not the money. It's not the whatever. It's like, I'm going fishing today, and I think the rising barometer and this and this and this is going to make the fish bite. And I could talk about it all day long.
Sure.
I got to get on the water. I got to know.
Yeah.
You know, people train. I don't understand how people train, like train and don't compete.
Yeah.
Run the experiment. Find out if it worked. Because if your training didn't work, if you didn't get better, your training didn't work.
100%. Yeah.
And so like, that's where the addiction is. For me, it's running the experiment. Just, was I right?
Yeah.
Was I wrong? I don't really care either way.
Yeah.
But I'm going to try it again.
Yeah.
And again. And
I
again.
mean, it's a great way to say it, man.
Yeah.
It's like you have to test it.
You have to.
Right? Like, get out there and test it.
What's the point otherwise? Hey, Brian, you look stronger. Yeah, well, I'm a champion. Well, are you?
Yeah.
But until you get against the best dudes in the world, it's hopefully a really big question mark.
Yes. Yep. And and that's, stepping out on that proving ground. I think it's a mental spot.
Yes.
To get there, and then especially to get there and then thrive.
Yes.
Right. And to thrive on competition and that challenge. And, just like you said with your dad, it's like I want to be challenged. I want somebody to challenge me. And, it was like those moments for me, a lot of times in training, to be fair, that's where it was like, if you could, if I could have guys that were willing to kind of go to that breaking point mentally and physically.
Yes.
Right. And then I could thrive on that. It's so big. Right.
Isn't
like
it just so addictive, and like
Yes.
that ride is just, there's nothing like it.
Nothing. Yeah.
There's when you're in that flow state and things are super hard, but they're working.
Yeah.
You're seeing a light at the end of the tunnel, and you're like, oh, this is going to work.
Yeah.
I'm getting it.
Yeah. You walk out of certain training sessions and things click, and it's then the excitement of the competition builds, because it's like, all right, like you said, you're going to go test what just got done.
Yeah.
And then you just have to execute on what was built, and that's
it's an exam that you studied for really, really well. And you're like, let's go ace this thing.
Yes.
Like, I know all the answers.
Yeah. Like that type of preparation is hard to beat, man. It's especially, at a high level, walking in, and that's, I think, finding that, for lack of a better term, X factor.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and I'm also, very excited about the X Factor machine that we just got to play with, man, because that's going to be wild. And then, like, my favorite, the back attack, which a lot of people have, either seen me use or heard me talk about or whatever. But it's one of those things where, like, those things, and now this game, like we were talking about, transfers from all the stuff I did in strongman to arm wrestling now. And like, I love that. Cause even you getting on there, showing me a couple things and saying, well, what if you did this? Like, what if you pin this here and you got here, and like different leverage. And then for me, it's like, I can see you thinking, then I start thinking, and it's like, all right, well, now we're building on this. And it's like, well, what can you bring to that game that maybe somebody else isn't doing? But it's essentially for that, it's going and getting the rocks.
Yes.
Right.
Invested.
You're invested. Exactly. And I mean, same thing I used to do with strongman. It was like, oh, I'm going to lift a natural stone that looks like this. Well, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to go to a rock quarry. I'm going to dig through rocks. I'm going to take a scale. I'm going to find out this shape of rock, maybe get a couple of them,
Yep.
But I spent hours doing that, you know,
And a lot of money.
Yes.
And a lot of time.
Yep.
And that's this thing like we kind of talk about. Winning is expensive.
Yeah. Yeah.
You might be a super freak that grabs whatever rock and gets it the first, but I haven't seen it.
No.
You never, you that whole Disney approach of I'm just going to be the guy and you're just so much better than everyone. Just like, yeah. Sure. And that level, it doesn't exist.
Yeah. Especially once you get to a higher level.
Right.
It just changes, you know, in ways that, you know, aren't necessarily sensical, right? Like it's like you keep going up, but it's like the smallest things turn into the biggest things, and you have to put everything under a magnifying glass,
right,
to expose that. So
right, I'm excited. Like, man, you made me really interested in arm wrestling more so than just the, hey, wow, that's cool. I know I probably couldn't do that very well. Those guys are strong.
Yeah.
But when you were talking about all the different techniques, and then like, please keep me posted.
Yeah.
Like, especially with the X Factor, because like that's I not seen it the way you were showing it,
sure,
like, kind of how that could apply. And so now like there's this big hypothesis in my head now that I have to see the experiment run now.
I'll tell you what, it's I think it's going to be a fun experiment.
Oh man,
that's what I think.
You're terrifyingly violent on that thing.
I'm excited to be that. I'm honestly excited. Like, yeah, this is going to be. I mean, with the arm wrestling stuff, it's going to be different for me because in strongman, you line up against an implement. Of course, you're competing against another competitor. I mean, the only time I really got to do like a hand-to-hand thing is I did a sumo wrestling match in strongman.
Right.
And that was different because you're like, all right, when they say go, one of us is going out of here, right? And, you know, thankfully that didn't happen a lot because, it was weird, a little weird. It was over in Ukraine. It was a different thing.
They were hearkening back to the 80s.
Yeah. But like it's like you can feel this. It is, very much like a combat sport.
Yes.
It's a combat strength sport, right? Like that's the best way to say it. So it's like
with like micro moves.
Yes.
That's the interesting thing.
Yep. And it's I think that's what, in all fairness, man, it's like I've been on the outside interested in it for quite a while.
Okay.
But obviously, competing in strongman, it's like, well, I'm not going to be able to arm wrestle while I'm competing in strongman. I'm focused on that. And so, transitioning out and retiring, and now it's like, okay, well, this is interesting.
Yeah.
But now it holds my attention because of those reasons. It's like, all right, well, now I can break this down and figure it out a little bit more. And I think that's what's been so fun is it's a problem solving thing, but then the combative nature of it also is there's an excitement factor to that that's different.
It's not a closed skill anymore. It's very open. Like, hey, maybe this guy's going to pull, he's going to push, he's going to stall, he's going to this.
Yeah.
Ooh, that gets.
Be ready for all of it. Yeah.
Now,
I don't know.
Now looking back, how many strong men have like gotten into arm wrestling? I know Magnus Samuelson did.
He did.
Cleve Dean did.
Dean. Yep. Yeah. He was one of the original guys, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of guys have talked about or brought up Cleve Dean. Like his hand, I think, was massive. Yeah. Just a big.
That's saying a lot from you.
Yeah. Big hand. I mean, I never got to feel it, but it's just like he had a mitt, I think.
Yeah.
Just like one of those things.
He was a 400+ pound guy.
Big guy.
Just a monster.
Guy. Maybe even more, like, upper 400s, but, just, Wasn't he a pig farm or something like that?
Yeah. Maybe Georgia or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So just a big dude, but, it's there's been a few strongmen. I think you'll see some more.
Yeah.
I to be fair, really wanted to arm wrestle Magnus Samuelson. That would be, did
he break Mega Man's arm? Is that the one that did?
Yeah. 95. Yep.
I thought he did.
Yep. Yeah. But he knew the thing is with arm wrestling, like he knew what he was doing because he was the European champion.
Right.
And Nathan Jones did not know what he was doing. So, there's definitely certainly that possibility of breaking your arm. But if you know what you're doing, it's kind of hard to get, like you get in a bad spot, but you kind of know you're in a bad spot.
Not to push through.
You're not going to the side. You're not pushing to the side, like that rotation. So it's basically, I mean, if you watch it, like Nathan Jones goes and basically turns to the side, opens up and starts twisting. And then it's just everything torques in the wrong direction. And Magnus just holds him. So he essentially breaks his own arm. Like it's not really like, that, but yeah, it's once you have to learn the basics for sure. I mean, it's with anything, right? Like you could walk in and get hurt for sure, but there's a different level to that. Like hopefully, I'm navigating the course, man. It's just like anything. It's kind of like going back. And I get to go back and have started as a beginner, right? Like
isn't that addictive?
It is. Yeah.
That part of it, I really, really, really enjoy. I mean, it's fun being on top, but I love doing something that doesn't really matter if you're good at it, because there's like, I'm not expected to be good at it. Let me just learn a ton of some ask a million questions. And
I feel like I've walked in again. I wish in some capacities, like now the expectations on me that have been put on me are very high.
Oh yeah.
I put high expectations on myself. Like there's no doubt about that, but it's like, coming in and this is probably more today's day and age, whatever, like social media, all this stuff is like, oh, well, Brian's got to do this or that, or he's got to be the world champion next week, or else, else he's nothing, like he's crap if he doesn't do that. And like,
he wasn't that strong.
No, not at all. Yeah. So it's one of those things. It's kind of, it's kind of fun to hear all the opinions, right? Because everybody's got their opinion,
right? Like
from the side, and it's just a different thing. And I think certain people understand at different levels, and who knows where it can go. And I mean, there's no guarantee either way, but I like challenges and I like learning and I like pushing myself, right? Like it's one of those things where this can be kind of fun for me, because compared to the lifting where, all right, like realistically speaking, I probably have carried the heaviest super yoke I'm ever going to carry, right?
Most likely.
Do I want to go put, over 1,500 pounds on my back again, right? Do I want to do that, right? I did it, and until somebody comes along and beats that, then it's like that can stay, right?
Right.
I don't need to necessarily prove that, because I know I was capable of it.
Right.
And that's the fine line of going back to training in those movements. Not that I won't carry a yoke again.
Yeah, sure.
I will, but it's just like, do I need to go to that level? But now I can go to everything that I do within arm wrestling is going to technically be the best that I have done, which is it's kind of lights a fire for me.
Oh yeah,
where I haven't found my best. Right. Like I'm going to continue to improve, and technique will get better, and then I'll refine that a little bit more, and so it's very mentally stimulating.
Yes.
In that capacity, right? So it's a fun one for me in that way, because it's a great outlet, and then it's a way for me to push myself competitively in a different mode than strongman.
Right. That maybe one that is not as rough on the body long term as well, or as time consuming.
For sure, longevity wise, man. Sure. I mean, there's a lot of guys competing in their mid to late 50s, 60 years old. Like you're still able to do it at a high level too, which is pretty crazy.
Probably putting a 1,500 pound yoke on your back. Not pretty much any later than now is probably
not. I mean, I still, the cool part of walking away from strongman where I wasn't broken is I always can think like I know I could do that if I needed to, right? Like you still think that. Yeah. Like if I really needed to train for it, I'm not broken. I could do it, It's like that kind of thing. Now I think there's some power in that, because I wanted to walk away before I was forced to walk away.
Smart.
If that makes sense. It's like, so mentally I always like to have that little seed of like, you know what, man, if I needed to, I could still do it,
What was the heaviest yoke that you ever walked?
1565.
Here's a question that's interesting. If it was 1570, would it make a big difference to you?
Nope. That day, honestly, the way that felt, I could have carried, I think I could have approached 1,800 probably. Like it was,
yikes.
I was ready for that. Ready.
Wow.
Yeah. Locked in. Like it didn't matter. It didn't, like, to me, it didn't matter what was on there.
Gosh, that's
like,
so crazy.
That was a zone. Like the best way to say it is that's like a,
yeah.
You know, certain times there's, you know, moments where you're almost like one of the years with that yoke, like I was like quite literally, it's going to sound weird, but like I almost got to a point where I was outside my body watching myself do it.
Right.
And I had envisioned it and visualized it so many different times that I knew what was going to happen. And then it happened, you know,
just
so
totally
it's like
manifested it.
Yeah. But it didn't matter. Like, honestly, that I was so locked in, man. It didn't matter. Like it felt easy. Like it was so easy to do. Afterwards it would, you know, and granted, I say 1,800. Okay. Like if people are going to call me on that, it's like, well, all I'm telling you is that was not the limit. So there was more,
yeah.
There was more in the tank, big time, you know, and then you know, it's a lot of weight, but when you're that, I think when you're that locked in and you're thinking like a machine and it's just like, I'm going to do this, you know, so it's just, you walk up there with everything focused, so locked in, it's just going to happen, you know?
What a feeling.
It's crazy.
Have you ever read that book, Rise of Superman?
Yeah,
read that when you get a chance. It's about flow state, and it's about basically how your brain speeds up, but it makes everything slow down from a visualization standpoint.
Interesting.
And so it probably felt like you were just, like you said, floating, like you weren't even there.
Just, yeah.
And it talks about the science behind it. It's a cool book.
That is cool,
But it
man.
talks about how like the best competitors, they hit this weird flow state, you know, like the first ones that surfed Mavericks or whatever it was, all these things that like kill you, you know? And I would be interested to after reading it, what's your experience with that? And
the Rise of Superman.
Rise of Superman.
Okay.
And it talks about basically flow state in its performance aspects.
Interesting.
It's really cool. But I think it was one time it was talking about like the brain will speed up. It actually, I think it was talking about like your eyes, take in information. Let's just call it 100 frames per second. Let's make up that number. But,
sure.
But under an aroused state, it might be 300 per second. So, but what that is, your brain is taking in 3x the amount of information. So it's processing it. And so it makes everything seem slow, because just like slow-mo, you're just getting more frames. Yep. And so you'll hear guys will like be on the, you know, they'll be batting and they said like they could see the stitches just slowly turning in. That's, you know, in it's a physiological effect that happens. Or, you know, I mean, there's times that I was throwing and it was just like,
you were just doing
you're just there. You're just enjoying the ride and, you know, all this other, and then how do you get back to that? Like,
sure.
But then you realize in some ways the addiction is trying to find that again.
Yes.
Like where was that weird hole in the sky that I found that
right
I just
there.
lived in this flow state? And it's like, then it's the perpetual hunt for that state again.
Absolutely, man.
And that's the good stuff, right?
I love it, man. I love it. I feel like we could keep talking, man. And I unfortunately have I have soccer practice.
Of course. Yeah, you're playing soccer
boys.
now too.
No, I am not. I'm gonna go be dad on the sideline.
It's a good priority.
Yeah, man. But I appreciate your time, brother.
Yes, man. Had a great time.
Yeah, seriously, more than you know. And yeah, excited about the equipment and all the possibilities for sure, man.
Awesome. Thank you for having me, Brian.
Love it. If you guys want to check Bert Sorin out, Sorin X, you can definitely do that. And if you enjoyed the podcast, please give it a share. It helps us to get out to more people and spread the message and try to do all the good things that we are trying to do. So hope you're all doing amazing for now. Go out and be great. We'll check you guys later. If you enjoyed this podcast episode and would like to listen to another, click right here. And to stay informed about new podcast episodes, click here to subscribe.